Thank you. Well, I'm Sue Hagan. I'm the chair of the Met Council. Thank you very much for coming today. We are going to be talking about the release of our report analyzing the stadium site at Arden Hills. And before we get going, I just want to say one really awkward thing. I'm giving a presentation, and I think the PowerPoint is behind me, so I hope I'm going to be tracking on that, and Michelle is telling me it is, but we'll try to stay connected on that. And this is probably unusual for a press conference to give a PowerPoint presentation, but there is a lot of detail in this report, and we want to make sure that we're accurately conveying it to you. As I get started, I wanted to say a special thank you to the many people who helped us prepare this report. This was something that we did in cooperation with a number of organizations and entities. A special thank you to the state agencies of MnDOT and MPCA, Minnesota DNR, MMB, Metropolitan Airports Commission, the GSA, the U.S. Army, the Minnesota Army National Guard, the City of Arden Hills, Mounds View, New Brighton, Blaine, Shoreview, the Rice Creek Watershed District, XL, and CenturyLink, and as well to the Vikings in Ramsey County. We've shared a lot of data during the last 75 days, and so we've had great cooperation from all parties in preparing this report. So first of all, just to get to what is this report and what is it not, we are preparing and did this report at the request of Governor Dayton. At the end of your report, you'll see that letter. And that really started with a request by the governor to ask us to assess the risks to the public and any liabilities with the site that is the subject of an agreement between the Vikings and Ramsey County. So this is not a comparison of multiple sites. It is really an attempt to look at one site and see what types of risks or liabilities are there that we should know about as a public before we make an investment in this site. We have also been asked to suggest ways to mitigate risks that are identified, and you'll see those in the report as well. So the report reviewed several items. We looked both at schedule risks and cost risks, the two critical elements of risk in a major project like this. We looked at a number of categories: land transfer and remediation, environmental review and documentation, transportation, utilities, permitting and approvals, and then the financing structure. So we identified several risks in these categories, but the subject of the press conference today and my comments today are really going to be on the major risks, because this is a 200-page report. So just to orient ourselves again to where we are, let's take a look at the site. This is a 430-acre site on the TCAP site. If you are looking at the screen, you'll see that the parcels are really divided into two. There are two parcels. The southern parcel is what we are calling the stadium property, and I'll refer to that as the stadium property. There are 260 acres in that parcel. The northernmost parcel, and you can see up on the screen there with the smaller red area, is called the development property, and there are 170 acres in that parcel. So as we look at this, the dark green represents the Rice Creek North Regional Trail. On the west of this site is I-35W. To the east is the Arden Hills and Army training site. The brown prime tracer area is not a part of the 430-acre stadium proposal, and we have not looked at that in this report. So let's move to the stadium parcel itself. The stadium parcel is where the stadium will be built, obviously, the support facilities for the stadium, the parking, and the circulation and roadways for people to get in and out of the stadium. And these are the general characteristics of this parcel. This parcel will be the parcel that will be transferred by the GSA on behalf of the Army to Ramsey County, that would then be conveyed to a stadium authority and the Vikings. Under the terms of the deal today, the Stadium Authority and the Vikings will enter into a long-term lease agreement for the stadium. The cost of constructing the stadium is the sole responsibility of the Vikings under the current agreement. Let's look at, for a second, at the development parcel. That's the 170 acres. This is a site that will be acquired by the Vikings or an affiliate organization of the Vikings for future development. For example, there could be a mixed-use development on this property. It has not yet been defined as to what that use will be or the timing of that use. That will depend on the market and the economy. We do know that after the initial sale of the land from the GSA to Ramsey County, that the county will immediately sell that parcel to the Vikings or their affiliate. They will then have 8 years under the current agreement to develop that parcel. And should that development not occur, that goes back to Ramsey County. So that's kind of an overview of the current proposal. And so I'm going to identify the funding cost for that proposal is really scenario 1. And you'll see the pie chart up here. That proposed total for the funding of that parcel in the current agreement between the Vikings and Ramsey County is $1.111 billion. You can see that the Ramsey County share of that is $350 million. That's the green on the pie chart. The state of Minnesota's share is the $300 million, the blue. The part for the Vikings is the purple. That's kind of cute, I think. And there is a funding gap of $39 million that has not yet been identified as to who is going to pay that. And then there is anticipated, and this is only in the agreement between the Vikings and Ramsey County, $15 million from the sale of the Metrodome. We are not making any judgment about the actual value of that site, the sale of that site. We're just reflecting what's really in the agreement right now between the Vikings and Ramsey County. There are ongoing costs about ongoing discussions between the Sports Facility Commission, the Vikings, and the Ramsey County about that gap amount. We've not analyzed that. We're just really analyzing what's in paper, what's been agreed to, what's public amongst the parties today. So that is what I would call scenario 1. That's the current condition, the current financial parameters of the deal. So we are going to talk about 3 major risks this morning, and our report goes into that in some detail. There is an executive summary, and there are findings that go into more detail in the report, and they summarize other risks. So there are other risks that I'm really not going to cover right now that you can see more as you look at the report. The purpose of the risks we're identifying are really to focus on those that could put in jeopardy the public and private partnership for the stadium. And there are 3 key risk factors. Cost of delay, an unfunded cost gap, and just additional costs that result from the remediation process. And then the capacity of Ramsey County to produce its share through a sales tax of the amount it is contributing in this agreement. So let's talk about each one of those. Let's talk about the first one, the cost of delay. This land transfer process is land that's now owned by the U.S. Army. It would be acquired by Ramsey County through the GSA. It is a very complex parcel. It's a very complex piece of land. It is the largest Superfund site in the state of Minnesota. So there's a great deal of environmental assessment work that has not yet been completed that needs to be done to identify risks associated with the infrastructure development of that site. The land is contaminated with industrial heavy metals and organic compounds. And it is a complex transfer of land for a variety of reasons. First, the size of the site, the extent of the contamination, the fact that there are 2 parcels here, one for development of the stadium and one for associated mixed-use development. The Ramsey County and Vikings schedule identifies a 12-month period of time to accomplish that transfer. We think that is unrealistic, and it's much likely that it will take more time than that. The second area I want to talk about with cost of delay is actually just the process that's associated with remediation and what needs to be done there. So we have to take several steps before you can start the remediation process. You have to have a plan approved by the MPCA that approves the remediation process. We don't have that yet, and that is a plan that needs to be done. There is a difference between the cleanup standard for transfer of the property from the Army and GSA to Ramsey County and what is acceptable to them and what is acceptable to the state of Minnesota and the PCA. The PCA level has to be cleaned up to a more stringent level for industrial use in the state rules and laws than it does for the federal transfer of property. So the site may need to be cleaned up more than is currently anticipated and expected, and at least we have to have a remediation plan for the cleanup that is acceptable and approved by the MPCA. So the delay costs are both the actual transfer and then the delay associated with identifying the needed remediation for the site and the securing of the local approvals for that. The cost range for remediation in the proposal today between the Vikings and the county is actually at $30 million. We think this is on the low end of the range. We are projecting that land acquisition and remediation costs could range from $23 to $70 million. And this is really a very wide range, and it really stems from the uncertainty that as of today. So this is not a cost of delay, this factor. This is actually a factor associated with money that would have to be expended to do the environmental assessment, get the remediation plan approved, and then accomplish the remediation at the site. So these cleanup costs cannot be contained by obtaining insurance. We've found that it's just not available for this project. I know Ramsey County was attempting to find out if there was some cost gap mitigation insurance there, but it is not there. And it puts there is a process that the county could go through to put more of the onus on the cleanup contractor for those costs. That's unknown at that time, but that would be one way of mitigating the cost to clean up on the site. So the cost of delay on the schedule. The current proposal calls for an opening of the stadium in 2015. We think that is unrealistic. 2016 or 2017 is more realistic. The cost of delay in the schedule, this is just the inflationary cost of delay, we are projecting at approximately $46 million per year. The Vikings themselves have estimated a cost of delay for a one-year delay from $35 to $57 million, and we have just picked a number in the middle of that range at $46 million. So a two-year delay we would estimate at as much as $92 million. So in the current proposal between the Vikings and the Ramsey County, there still is a gap of $39 million. It's not identified what the source of funding for that will be. In our scenario 2, what we put together is just adding not cost on the high end of the range for remediation, but just looking at a one-year delay. So that would add $46 million to the current proposal for a one-year delay, and that is really just for the inflationary costs, not looking at any additional costs for remediation. So if you look at the current site this current site chart for scenario 2, you can see that would increase the total cost of the project to $1.157 billion. The Viking share that would increase, that $46 million increase would be shared between the Vikings and the county. The county would bear an additional $7 million, and the Vikings would pick up an additional $39 million. So you can see that the total share for scenario 2 would be the Vikings with a cost of $450 46. I can't read, it's too small up there. Number, and then the state of Minnesota's share stays the same, and the Ramsey County increases to 357. So this is what I would call kind of the medium range scenario for delay. The third scenario that I'm presenting to you is really scenario 3. This would reflect unfunded gap costs, additional costs for environmental assessment and remediation, and this would increase but just a 1-year delay, not a 2-year delay, and so that would increase the total budget by $123 million. So as we look at the next chart, I think we go to the scenario 3. You can see it there. So 1.234 billion. That would be 1.11 billion plus a 46 million in delay plus a $77 million high-end cost range, bringing the total up to 1.234 billion. Because of the current agreement between the county and the Vikings, the county and most of these additional costs are associated with infrastructure development. The county would be picking up a larger share of these costs. So they'd be picking up about 66% of that $77 million cost, and the Vikings would be picking up a total of about $26 million for the additional cost. So the infrastructure cost issue falls more on the shoulders of Ramsey County. So just again to clarify, this scenario 3 chart, and it is in the report, would identify cost for a 1-year funding gap of $46 million plus an additional $77 million for high-end costs for the environmental assessment and remediation of the site. So, where is the most uncertainty in the total projected costs? It's really in the acquisition and environmental assessment process. We have not in any way altered the Vikings proposal for the actual cost of the construction of the stadium. We have taken their estimate for that. We've not inflated that, and we have not added additional costs for that. So we've just carried that number through in our scenarios. The burden, again, of the most uncertain costs for the Viking Stadium proposal between Ramsey and the Vikings really lies with the county. The county takes 66% of that, and the Vikings 34%. So if we go to the next chart, then the third risk area then really has to do with the additional share of the costs that the county bears because of the uncertainty in the infrastructure costs for the stadium. We analyze the sales tax capacity of the county if it levies a half-cent sales tax or produces revenue. They do have sufficient capacity to look at to raise the $350 million from the sales tax. If there are cost overruns and delay overruns at the high-end level, increasing the county share by $58 million, the county may not have the capacity from the sales tax to raise the $408 million. So that is another significant risk that we have identified in this report. We did not look at any of the state funding sources or risks associated with those because those have not yet been determined. That's really to be determined by the governor and the legislature. So we really looked at the risk to the public on the county side, on the acquisition and remediation side of the transaction, and then the delay. So that's a quick overview of a 200-page report, and I am here to answer questions. And I want to thank the staff who have been working with us, and they may be able to answer detailed questions that I am not able to answer.
Can I ask Ted the questions if possible? Or are you taking
Yeah, and Ted wants to, do you want to say something? I think Ted's going to say something now, so come on up.
Thank you, Sue. And I want to thank all the people that worked so hard on this report. There's a lot of work done in a short period of time, and your staff has been fantastic to work with. They're almost as good as when I was here. although a lot of you still are. And also Kimley Horn, which is a contractor who is in the business of doing this kind of work, was selected to do this work, and they put a lot of people on this project. And I would like to say that they were approved by both Ramsey, the Vikings, Met Council, as a fair and unbiased, fair and balanced, Channel 9 guys, contractor, and they did a lot of background work that proved helpful. And then, of course, there's the expertise of the Met Council on the remediation and the licensing. So this is a very comprehensive look at this report. I want to put some context on this as it relates to moving forward, and then we can answer questions. And I got a feeling you may hear from the governor yet today as well. But number one, this has been extremely helpful. There has been a number of risks that were a concern and a drag on this proposal that have been taken off the table. Number one, the transportation risk, the work the Met Council did to create a regional traffic model to go work with all the permitting agencies. We now know that 101 number is a good number, and I think many people felt that, you know, the original estimate was 175 million. We didn't know whether you had to look at both parcels or at one, and we've done a lot of key specific work to, I think, take away the biggest concern on this site, and that was the cost of off-site transportation infrastructure. So I feel very good about clearing that cloud up. There's also an issue with being on a watershed district and with a new facility there, whether there would be a lot of local infrastructure, sewer interceptors, local water costs, and that has been taken off the table as a concern that would be something that is negligible or non-existent. The delay issue was fairly clear. Very difficult to get this done in a year, even if wherever you would do the site. This is a large and complex entity, and there's a cost of delay. If you put a project forward, large construction project forward like this, the estimates are you're probably going to get 20%, 25% lower cost just because the construction industry isn't going so well. The assumption is if you wait a year or 2 years to shovel, break, move forward, that those costs will go up. Again, the 46 million is a range, but now we have a number on the risk to put into the sources and use discussion. Also, it's helpful to do an analysis of the Ramsey County capacity. When you're trying to put something like this together, you got to go, what if? And if this happens, who's covering it? And I think we've got an idea that Ramsey probably going to that high a level will not work and would create a significant risk to this project. So let me put this in a little bit of context. When the legislature originally put a bill together this year, the idea was it would be site neutral and that we would put together funding packages for the state and probably the local governments, and then we would have a site selection group that would go out and do this kind of work and analyze the site. In the legislative process, it was pretty clear that the legislator said, look, we're not going to give some commission, we're not going to vote all this money in and give some commission the right to make a selection if we don't like it. So the direction was to the Vikings is go find a local partner, come up with a plan, and bring it back to us. And as you know, last session didn't turn out all that well, but they had the Vikings have selected Arden Hills, and that's the site that we're working on. In the special session, we had issues as far as how can we pass a bill with all these unknowns. And if the road costs are more than 100, if the pollution costs are more than 30, all of these issues, it was impossible to move forward because you didn't know who could cover those costs and whether they would walk away or not. So this report really helps us move forward. And so where we are today is we were able to definitively put together where the Vikings and Ramsey County's position is, and not all of it is in this, what was analyzed today. And so now we're working very hard, and with this report I think we can expedite where we are to come up with a state position and try to see if we can merge the two to make this site work for Minnesota, for the region, for the Vikings, and to move forward. So we've been having a number of meetings with legislative leaders and with other interested parties. That work will continue, and this report helps us be much more definitive and clear about what it is we are proposing. So we thank you all for the hard work that you did and for the clarity that we have here, and we're able to now move forward at a speed and a certainty that we were unable to do so before, but for the report.
Based on the cost issues and the timeline issues, is the conclusion essentially that this project is not going to work and the Vikings need to find another site?
No, not at all. The conclusion is that we're able to put on a piece of paper what it actually is. You know, when you're looking at, if you're looking at the operating costs and the capital costs, a $46 million increase as a percentage is what? 2%? What? 3, 4, 5%. So there's a lot of elements into this that you can move around to make it work. So I would say the biggest cloud on this project was the uncertainty, and many, many, many of those clouds have been removed by this report.
Well, are you committed to the Ramsey County site and with the Vikings as part of that?
Our focus is to try and make the Ramsey County Arden Hills site work.
Ted, you had told me last week you didn't anticipate any time bombs in this report. Nothing in this is really a time bomb so much as it's just a lot of things that have to be worked through if they want to go ahead with it, and maybe accept a delay.
Well, I don't, look, to go forward and say, our job is to do the public's business well, okay? And there are examples of these stadiums working out really well for communities. Go to San Diego, and there's places like Phoenix Stadium, football stadium, or Cincinnati where the public didn't do its due diligence and they got stuck with a bad situation. See Target Center in Minneapolis where the city had to assume the operating costs. So while the governor said, let's move as quickly as possible, let's do this right so that it works for the community, right? Not passing a bill and not knowing these issues or having at least some certainty to it, I think is not doing the public's due diligence properly. I would say in response to you that there are no time bombs in this report, and in fact a lot of things that we were really concerned about are taken off the table, and so I think we're able to, like the roads being the big one, and I think we're able to now move forward and be more definitive in our discussions and try to be able to have the state respond to the county and the Vikings and hopefully put it all back together again and move forward.
Does this make a special session any likelier, or does it affect that at all?
Well, I don't like to speak for my boss, but you know, he's engaged. His sleeves are rolled up, I can assure you, and he wants to move forward as quickly as possible. I don't think we could move forward with a bill without the answers to these questions. I think they're definitive and they're strong enough that we're able to move ahead and present to the state leaders and try to come up with a state position and see if we can merge that with the Vikings Ramsey position and move ahead.
Well, doesn't this make it harder to do that? Doesn't this report, particularly the worst case scenarios, make it harder to come up with a proposal at the legislature?
No, I think it makes it easier. I think, you know, you go through the legislative process and there's going to be questions saying, well, what, you know, MnDOT originally said the roads were going to be 175. You're telling me 101. Why do I believe you now rather than then? And if the answer is, well, I'm Norwegian and it's my birthday, it's not really very good, right? So, you know, and if they see what was seen is you had a project with huge amounts of unknowns, which generally in a big construction project, if you don't know anything, that's really a bad thing. I mean, you know, when we did the light rail, we were really scared about the tunnel into the airport because we didn't know. And that's where all the risk of that project was. And when it turned out to be okay, we knew we could deliver it on time. We didn't know when the digging started. So the analogy is there are so many unknowns on this, and this report has narrowed it down that we're now able to move ahead.
Can you tell us that this is a report that will be for Ramsey County and not an attempt to build a stadium in Minneapolis
Yeah, this is
Slow down the Ramsey County.
this is an attempt to move forward, just the opposite path. This is an attempt to try and put a bill together that we can pass at the Arden Hills site.
Would Minneapolis make more sense logistically and cost-wise?
I've been around. Well, we studied that we're working on, and we studied the Arden Hills site.
Wouldn't you have to do, I mean, to make it in comparison to Minneapolis, wouldn't you have to do the same report on the farmer's market side or wherever? I mean, might they not have similar issues?
I think the difference with this analysis is that we actually had an agreement about a site. So we have financial commitments on two parties, and those have been put together, and that's what we were able to analyze to look at cost. And unless you have something like that, you
Wouldn't the
can't.
Minneapolis site, wouldn't it go through the same type of review if suddenly that site emerged?
Yes, I would think so. I would
Sure.
think that I would think that it was clear, no matter what site was selected, that opening a stadium in 2015 is unrealistic. So whatever price tags that you came up with, add the 46. Whether it's farmers market, I mean, you look at all the things that have to happen. There's no way that you couldn't put the 46 in any proposal. I think that's really important.
Governor Dayton has just released a lengthy statement here saying he's going to be meeting with you and legislators and whatnot in the next few days. Any idea of what a realistic timeline is on deciding whether to hold a special session and when that might happen?
Well, you probably ought to talk to him about that. But
He's going to talk to you about it, so.
yes, he's talked to me about it. But the key. Let's go back to where we are. We had a concept of how to do it. It didn't work. The Vikings had to go out and get a site and a partner. We tried to put it together at the Arden Hills site. We'd hoped to finance it from the state level based on a theory that with a $5 billion shortfall, there'd be some framework about how to gap that. And they came up with basically borrowing from future funds and shifting from the schools, which wasn't really a good framework to do a football stadium. So we stepped back, we came up with what we thought was a proposal, and there were too many unknowns. There were, if the costs of pollution are over $30 million, the county walks away. If the cost of transportation over $100 million, the Vikings walk away. We can't go to the legislature, ask everyone to take perhaps a career vote on a very complex and controversial issue, and then 3 months later, one of the parties walks away. Either we're doing this or we're not. So we now have definitive information to put this proposal together. We can see it, we can feel it, we can touch it. The unknown risks of this have been reduced by 80%. All of these things are risky. And in order to put something together in a responsible manner that has the least likelihood of sticking the public for some unknown bill, like the Target Center, I can't run it anymore, it's too expensive, is to analyze all these things to the ability possible. And this report helped us to do that and will help us move forward.
What about the governor's timeframe, though? He said he wanted to call a special session in October to mid-November. Is that still a realistic timeframe?
I think you'll have to ask him. I mean, we have to have a state position, so we need agreement from Senate leadership, both majority and minority, and House leadership, both minority and majority, to move ahead. I mean, this is not, you can't shift for this. This is a $1.1 billion, $1.2 billion proposal. It's highly newsworthy. People care about, as you guys know, when you do a report, people care about this, and we need to have all the answers before we're able to move ahead. And there wouldn't be a special session unless we thought there was agreement and unless we thought there were the votes. So.
Hey, Ted, have you heard from the Vikings or Ramsey County had projected 3-4% cost increase? You say move forward a lot. Are they still willing to move forward if it's a little bit more?
I would only assume so. I mean, we work, there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and I don't think this was completely unforeseen what the results of this were, and my presumption is we need to roll our sleeves up. But where we are now, there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to help expedite things, but where we are now, they gave us their final proposal on August 14th. The state owes the Vikings and Ramsey County back our counter, and we hope to do that as soon as possible. And there's a number of meetings that have happened in the last couple of weeks with leadership, and I presume next week there'll be, the big, everyone together in the same room, and can we figure this out?
Is there any possibility that this funding gap that's been identified, 39 million plus the delay, so around 80 million, 85 million, is there any possibility that it'll be made up by an additional contribution from the state above the 300 million?
I think that's highly unlikely. The state's position has been, we're putting 300 million in, that's our number, and we're putting 300 million in, and that's our number. I can't speak for all I can do is put the information together to the decision makers, and they decide. So if they change their mind, that's fine, but we've been down that road. That question has been asked of us 30 different times, and the answer has always been, no, it's 300. In fact, as you recall, we're going to make buttons that say it's 300. So I doubt that's going to change. And from this report, I doubt that the Ramsey contribution could change either.
Can you realistically give a timeline about when this is going to get dealt with in the immediate future? In addition to, there's going to be meetings next week, that kind of thing, but realistically, when could this get done?
I can just tell you the governor's position, that if we have to go to a session next year, it gets more difficult to do in an election year. And it's his opinion that there's a timing to do this, both from the political side of we need to do it now, and it's not an election year so much, and then also you've got the timing of the cost delay. I mean, if this were to slip 2 years, you got, what is it, $92 million difference. So that there is a sense of urgency here that I believe that he has, and I think that the legislative leaders have as well, that we need to try and resolve this issue as quickly as possible. Having said that, consensus is not exactly in the air these days as spring is in May. So this is a tough issue, but we have our sleeves rolled up. The governor is leading, and we're trying to make this happen.
Do you have a sense of urgency about the Vikings lease expiring at the end of this year, and what about that?
Well,
is that a factor here for you to
I think that is a factor. They had the lease is up at the end of this year, and obviously with the new roof and the turf, wherever they would go, the assumption is, say if we were to get a new stadium that opened in 2016 in Arden Hills, so we'd have them at the Dome through 2015. So clearly there's we know from them that they do much better and they'd rather play in the Dome than a TCF Bank Stadium. So presumption is, barring something unforeseen, that they're going to be there for a while, and that after this season we'll renegotiate perhaps the agreement. We've made a number of concessions to the Vikings. They're paying half of what's in the use agreement, so they're getting a pretty good deal at the Metrodome, and we've put a number of improvements into the building and tried to be as cooperative as possible. On the other hand, we also know they need a 1.5 million square foot facility to fit modern NFL revenue needs, and this is a 900,000 square foot. So as not to get yelled by Lester Bagley, because if I don't say that, then he'll tell it to you. So I'll give him a little break here today. But we stand ready to fill their needs as long as possible in that building. And we had a building with a great new roof and new turf and new paint, and I wouldn't see where there'd be any issues in negotiating a lease going forward, but obviously that's up to them.
If you have a stadium, if you don't pass a stadium bill,
My presumption is they're going to play in the Metrodome for the next few years, unless there's some fact that I don't know about.
Does this plan assume a retractable roof?
No.
So no roof in
The price of the building was originally $890, and to scope it down, it went to about $822. And one of the things that was taken out, it was a retractable roof.
Based on this analysis,
It's a fixed roof.
based on this analysis, you're going to come down here, this is the site, this is where we need to work on it.
Based on this review, I will tell the governor in more definitive terms what a deal at Arden Hills would look like between the Vikings and the state. And let's see if we can get agreement from the legislative leadership. That's the task at hand today. This is Make no doubt about it. Without this report, we could not move forward. With this report, there are no unknown time bombs. The biggest concern, which was the transportation piece, has been resolved. And I fully believe that the work now is to roll up our sleeves and to try to come to agreement from all the parties with the goal of moving ahead as quickly as possible.
You feel fairly confident that Ramsey County will pick up the extra slack if there is that delay?
No, I don't think Ramsey, I think one of the findings of the report is the Ramsey County sales tax does not have the capacity to pick up cost overruns. So one of the issues going back is to be, okay, what if the pollution remediation range was between 24 and 72? So our job is to say, what if it comes in at 60? Who picks that up? Because not answering that is not responsible. So that there's a lot of things that we need to sit down and talk to the Vikings and the league and Ramsey about to solve. But in the areas, the two things that of concern on the site now is the delay cost. We have a number. And then for those cost overruns that the county was to pick up, how are we going to back those up should they happen? Those are the two big things. Most importantly, from trying to get a deal done, the biggest concern, which was the transportation cost, is off the table. And so we have a much more definitive scope here.
Just to follow up on that, aren't there bigger cost overruns potentially down the road besides the transportation issue? I mean, isn't there still a major problem with how this thing's going to be funded with their cost overruns?
Well, the scenario 3 shows $123 million in addition to the current proposal. And that's supposed to cost a delay and the high end of costs for assessment and remediation.
So if there's no more state money, what you're saying is the Vikings and Ramsey County have to alter their agreement in some way to figure out who would cover those cost overruns.
Correct. And to your question, as much as possible, to the pollution remediation, to the stadium costs, we would probably go for fixed bid contracts. So just like the light rail, you have a number. And if there's a change order or an overrun over here, you got to take it out over there. So we would need to be, and if you don't have that discipline, project of these sizes never come in on time or on budget. So if there's a $10 million cost overrun over here, maybe you take $10 million of video boards out over there. But there needs to be, as much as possible, the fixed bidding, and completely as possible, if there's an overrun here, whose responsibility is it?
Were there fewer cost overrun potential problems than you expected when the study started? That's a question for you to vote.
I was most concerned about the roads, not being a road person, but the original analysis was 175, and now we're at 101, and we have confirmation from the permitting agencies that they would accept this design. That's a major issue. The other major issue was, could we push through this project without having to solve for both parcels? Because if you had to build a project plan for both parcels, for sure, the $101 million wouldn't fall out. So what I consider the time bomb was where the road transportation infrastructure would come. And because we had Sue's staff put together a transportation model, so it said, okay, if cars are not going up there, where are they going to go? How do we track it? And that we now know from because you do an environmental review, and you take that review, and you go to the permitting agencies and say, will you accept it? The permitting agencies are saying, not in written, but we think this will work. So the biggest time bomb that I think all of us thought that could be the part of this has been taken off the table, and so this has been extremely helpful.
Great. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all very much.